And welcome back to the sweet spot, where CIOs talk about CIOs and where we talk about interesting things, hoping that, of course, that you think they're interesting too. Welcome back with me, Howard Holton. There you are, Howard Holton.
Hey, Paul. How's it going? I'm once again coming to you from a London train station.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm still in Nepal, as you can see. And we are joined today by yet another technology executive, Inderjeet Rana. How are you doing today?
Paul, I'm doing great. Nice to meet you, Howard. And I am here in New Jersey, Warren, not like a interesting place where you guys are at.
That's right.
I mean, New Jersey's fairly interesting. You have all those buried bodies, I mean, the mob was there for decades, so I'm sure there's plenty of interesting if you go dig in the backyard.
I heard about that. And, people often ask me that, why the hell you live in New Jersey? And sometime, I scratch my head and try to think about that, why do I do that? And I haven't run into anybody yet who can tell me that, okay, well, these are the 5 interesting places. That's why you have to live in New Jersey. So I'm still investigating, and it's been 20 years already. But next year will be a breakthrough, definitely. I will let you know.
Fantastic.
There's a new terminal at your airport that I haven't experienced yet. Have you experienced a new terminal?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
No, just the construction, right? I just experienced the construction. And I didn't like that.
No.
That was a turnoff for New Jersey, I have to be honest.
Right. And it's only on the United side. Rest of the airlines are still suffering.
So give us a little bit of give us a 101.
Right. So as a quick way of introduction is, my name is Inderjeet Rana. Mm-hmm. I'm a CTO at Hitachi Vantara, covering financial services globally. So I want to bring some light on the issues and the modern approach to manage and protect data. But before I do that, a little bit about myself that I've been with Hitachi for about 5 months, relatively new. But prior to this, I worked in the banking and financial industry for about 25 years, running infrastructure and technologies. Even today, I call myself as a customer rather than a provider. So I sit on the other side of the desk right now, thinking and talking as a provider, but which gives me an interesting viewpoint when I'm talking to our team internally and our customers outside. So before I joined Hitachi, I have basically 4 main chapters in my career, and Hitachi played a sort of an important role in each and every one of them because I've been using their technology for a long time. So it started out with Bell Labs. Mm-hmm. That's where the bits and bytes and all those things happened. Then from there, I moved to Merrill Lynch. From Merrill Lynch, I moved to Barclays Capital. And from Barclays Capital, I moved to New York Stock Exchange. So now, interestingly, every single of these companies disappeared through M&A. Either they bought by somebody or somebody bought them. So this is one of the attributes of myself, wherever I go, sort of it changes the dimension. So time will tell what happens to Hitachi, but I think Hitachi will in the position to buy more company than being bought out. Now, talking a little bit about the New York Stock Exchanges, this is where speed and stability matters. You guys going through COVID-19 pandemic and things like that, market swings, 3,500 points up and down during a given day. Something like that never happened. Now, when you see something like that, then you have to think about that. Am I stable? Is my infrastructure is operating normally? Am I able to sustain all these shocks which market throwing at us? And this is where the gravity of infrastructure comes in. Now, if you experience an outage in an exchange like that for about 5 minutes, it becomes an international news. Mm-hmm. So that's an attribute right there. Now think about pressure. That's the kind of environment exchange operates in. So what else I can tell you about myself? What is my current job? So from my job profile at Hitachi perspective, I work with the technology, product, solutions, and customers to ensure that we are continuously innovating and providing the technology to our customer to be more effective, to be more agile, and scalable across all the attributes of core, cloud, and edge. So this is in short summary, that's what I do.
Interesting. So I've got two questions before we jump into a technology conversation. So question number one, Howard and I have made the transition. We've made the leap between operating IT to providing IT. And we have some interesting stories on what that meant to make a turn. I'm interested in your perspective. Now that you're a few months in, you've made the leap to the provider side. What's the distinct difference between the two?
The fundamental difference is from a provider side, what I've seen is providers are hyper focused on customers. Means customer sits in the center of every single conversation. And there is a large body of machinery works alongside to come up to the final conclusion, what to be said to the customer, how to be presented to the customer, and what all product and solutions like we're going to be pitching in. Because end of the day, provider need to make money, and they have a limited shot. They have a limited number of hours to present all these framework in front of customer. So what I learned from here is, which I did not have a good understanding about coming from the customer side, is it's all about preparation. It's all about making sure that every attribute, every pulse of the customer is thought through before we say anything, before we pitch anything. Now, if I knew that before, I would have milked my vendors a little more. But,
so one of the things that I've found is all of that to be true. However, there's very few people in the provider side that actually were a customer and really do understand the perspective of the customer in any meaningful way. So we spend a lot of time in these meetings, the preparatory meetings, going, no, we don't, customers don't actually think that way. No, customers don't, like, it doesn't even operate that way. Let's kind of walk through a little one-on-one on how customers tend to operate, how CIOs tend to think, how EAs tend to think before we have these conversations. And I find when we do that, and the account team is receptive, it's so much more effective.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. Like, you are hitting right on the head over here, that particular nail. So now if you think about a customer, it's not about a persona, a personality. You have to think about, like, what kind of business they are in. Say, for example, you are in a banking and finance division. You have to look at that, what actually that firm is doing, how they make money, what all products they have. Are they into asset management business, or are they into a retail banking business? Mm-hmm. Now, let's take an example of asset management business. Now, in the asset management business, what happens is you have to understand that, what is their MBO? What are their mandates? They have to make sure that their clientele is growing. They have to make sure that they are able to make money through their product and services they offer. Means what I'm saying is, we have to have that view. We as a provider, we have to put ourselves into their shoe to understand their business actually, that what is it they do, how they make money, how they sustain these large workforces. And it's not about the technology, it's not about what we sell to them, it's about how we're going to enable them so that they can make more money, they can be more secure, they can be more agile, they can be more scalable, whatever it is. Now, we don't see that way. Sometimes as a provider, we have our blinders on. What we do is, okay, we are talking to the infrastructure folks, or we are talking to the data management team. We have to give them, like, what they're asking. Either it could be refresh, it could be, some new shiny product or things like that. We have to take that 3 notches up. We have to zoom out a little bit and say that how I can think so that that customer can make more money, how I can make them more smarter, so that they can think about that as a partner, not as a transaction. So,
and even if it's just understanding, like Howard and I, one of the first things we did when we started here was create the enterprise architecture practice. In fact, that was a good portion of Howard's mind share for the first year at least. And one of the 101s we had to do was uplift the conversation into, we'll call it a business model canvas conversation, right? So less about product out and more about customers' business holistically. So things like who their customers are, what customer segments they have, what assets they have, how they make money, how they spend money, what their supply chain looks like, but even for and foremost, all of that is what their value proposition to the market is, right? How they're perceived by their customers and their competitors. And once you document that, the conversation with a client is dramatically different, right? It's now about saying, now that we appreciate all the levers of your business, what are the important ones, right? And how are you tackling any of those levers?
No, absolutely. Because think of that, Paul, like, you said it right. It's about once we understand that, what the business is all about, like, what all levers to pull, end of the day, on the customer side, these are the human beings. These are the people, like, sitting over there, and their job is, at least the leadership side of it, to make decisions. Now, what we have to do is we have to structure our conversation in a way so that we can enable them to make quick decisions, and we can enable them to make faster decisions. Now, there are good ways to do it, and there are bad ways to do it. If we're going to throw a whole bunch of content at them, if we're going to throw a whole bunch of just a chaotic, anecdotes or a market comparison and this and that, all that material, they won't be able to decipher any of that. It throws them in a lockdown mode because their business priority is something completely different. Now they have to basically swift through all that crap we are giving them. Now, how they can find the right balance and get to a decision so that they can say yes, no, or maybe to whatever the product, whatever the technology, whatever the context is to get to the next level.
Well, there's no question that the customer is going to take anything they buy and use it to increase their profit, increase their value, right? Whether that's reduce cost and increase or increase profit, either way, right? And so, Paul and I talk about these kind of three buckets that we can fit in with each customer. We can be a provider, in which case all we do is throw technical details at technical people and allow them to figure out how do they turn that into a business value. Okay, we can do that. And most of our competitors and us, most of the time, that's the bucket we fit in. We talk a lot about being a trusted advisor, but we're really in the provider bucket, right? The lowest common denominator. An RFP is issued, or a request for some product is issued. We say our product is the best. Here's the price, and they buy it. That's really it. There's very, very little, I would call it enhanced value there, right? The product itself has value, but outside of the product, there's no value. The next level that we can move to is the kind of partner level, or vendor level, depending on the way you want to put that, right? And that's where we really need to understand how the customer makes money, how the customer spends money, probably more important, right? Because if we're not aligned to how they're planning on spending money, it doesn't matter what we do, we're not going to sell anything. How they plan to make money, not just how they make it today, but every single market has changed, right? Financial services is a really, really good example. We're seeing a whole lot of innovation in the financial services market that affects the total gamut, right? Where you make investments, how you handle retail banking, what retail banking will look like in the future, what the relationship that people will have with their bank is. It's no longer, I have my mortgage, my checking, my savings, my investment, my retirement, my credit cards all through one bank. That's 6 different things, and it's probably more like 12 things. I probably have that with 7 banks, right? I have I have my credit union from a former employer that I qualified for. I have a local credit union where I have a relationship. I have some bank that I've been with forever. I have some bank that gave me a better rate on a thing, right? I mean, and so how does the market not only look today, but where do they see the market going, and where do we see the market going based on the fact that we talk to at least 100 of 100 different companies that sit in kind of a similar market, right? What is that value we can bring to a customer, and how do we help them align their technology strategy to their business strategy, or at least align with what they've already done, right? And when we fail to do that, we're just another provider. When we succeed at doing that, we're now moving into that vendor partner quadrant, on our way, hopefully, to eventually push into the trusted advisor position, which I hate to say, we're probably almost never, if ever, actually in that position.
Right. So Howard, you're absolutely right. That's the key word. Trusted advisor, and it's extremely important to to differentiate that, when you talk to a vendor, or a provider, in the other words, is are you talking about a transaction or are you talking about a true partnership? And then decipher the meaning of true partnership a little bit more, feeling their pain, understanding like, where they want to go, how they want to transform some things like that. And then bring that trusted advisorship and giving them all the options in a very subtle way. That builds up a credibility. And most importantly, and this is what me as a customer, like, I always look for that when I'm selecting that which provider I'm going to go with is who got my back? Again, think of that. On the other side of the table, these are human beings. And human beings have, even though the most analytical people who are hinges on every single decision they make through their data. I've ran into the personality who are completely robots. Means they're going to be making decision based on completely analytical thinking. Unless it is done, there won't be any decision. But end of the day, all these guys are human beings. What they want to hear is, do they got my back? In case of something goes wrong, either it's a new technology or something so big, which I'm taking my chances on. It looks very good on the paper. It checks out everything in the testing. Now it's rolled out in production. Initial messaging is working fine, but now I'm scaling that up. I'm going in petabytes and petabyte of capacity. Now, if I run into a problem like that, I'm halfway through. I can't pull out. I can't push forward. I can't go sideways. What the hell I'm going to do? Who got my back? And are these guys credible enough? Are these guys big enough? Do they have a deeper bench and understanding of what I do so that they can bring the product and solutions and the fixes which I'm looking for to scale my environment or whatever I'm doing to the level I want? So if the answer is yes, that brings a very solid credibility and a very deeper relationship, regardless of that company. If that person, if that leader even leave that company, go someplace else, they're going to bring those people with them.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? And when we look to, you brought up trusted advisor. One of the things that is the most important in the partner relationship and the trusted advisor relationship is no. Right. No. If you're in fact my trusted advisor, then I have to trust you to tell me no when I shouldn't do something. Or at the very least, if you're a partner, you should tell me no when your product doesn't work for me. Like, it's a partnership, so there has to be this, it's not about compromise, it's literally about give and take, right? If the only thing the customer gets from me is the things I give them in the products that I give them and the way I tell them to use them, I'm still a provider, right? If they don't get anything from me, if I'm not giving anything up, I'm not actually a partner. And sometimes that means I have a product that technically fits your requirements, but frankly, this other thing is better, right? There's a better way to do that. There's, technically I could maybe do that, but the reality is you need this thing that's purpose-built to do exactly what you want. And if I'm a good enough partner, right, and it's a good enough customer, they're gonna hear that. They're gonna go, I really appreciate it, and then they're gonna come right back to the batter's box and go, okay, cool. So we got that thing. It's working great. That was excellent advice. Now we need this thing. Can you help me with this thing? And that's actually how you become that trusted advisor. A trusted advisor says no as often as they say yes.
Yep.
No, you shouldn't do that comes up, or no, you shouldn't do that with me should come up as often as yes, I can do that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, as long as it also includes, but I know others who do.
Correct.
And,
that's why
they may be competitors, they may not be, but at least I have an appreciation for the ecosystems of solutions, right? Yeah. I can help you with that partnership. So let's shift onto another side, talk about sort of thought leadership, because Inderjeet has some interesting thought leadership. As a side note, I thought I'd mention that I did publish a series of financial services blogs, the last one being yesterday, called Don't Reinvent the Wheel, Ride the Wave. It actually talks about a variety of those financial services specific innovations that are happening. And they're all business innovations versus technology innovations. Things either retail banking or investment banking or wealth banking or small business lending can actually do to increase wallet share, find customer segments they haven't found before, or just in general, get into a geographic market they haven't yet even broached before. So I highly recommend you click on that. We'll put this link in the notes. But let's talk about, Inderjeet, what your unpublished article reads, because it's incredibly interesting. And if I were to sort of summarize your perspective on this sort of technology double click, it would be about eliminating backup, or at least traditional backup, holistically. Because there are limitations to what you can do to the traditional backup, the data that you collect, and you could actually use the information you're collecting for real value. You have some thoughts on that? Do you have a summary on that perspective?
Yes, Paul, I can provide you a summary, a
Give us a
perspective,
short summary, and then Howard will have a take.
or a day-long conversation if you fancy that. But
Right. Give us
but,
the 120-second version.
right. So here is the thing, Paul. You walk into any of these big banks, you walk into any of the established corporation, take your pick from a S&P 500, any of those companies.
Mm-hmm.
And a large majority of the expense is going into the backup area. And let me expand on that one, is because, I took some time to decipher that, because I myself as a customer been through 4 of these companies. And, on a surface note, it's extremely important to protect the data. And it's extremely important to enable the data. Now it's even more important than the production part of it. And despite of all that, we are not able to enable the data. We are continuously taking the backups, and those backups are daily, weekly, monthly, over and over again. This is one of the largest footprint sitting in any corporation. And this is one of the darkest of dark data, which is sitting in any corporation. And most importantly, this is one of the most expensive per terabyte footprint sitting in any of those corporations. So this, in summary, the thought process over here is we have to change our thinking process as a corporation while we are transforming. What that mean is we have to have a first design level thinking. In that thinking, we have to look at entire thing as an operational recovery and as an archive, and get rid of all the backups in the middle, completely out of the window, but do in a kind of a step fashion over the period of time. What I mean by that is, if you rewind the clock, go back 15 years ago, we did not have any credible archive platform. That's why people use backup for backing up the content as well as archiving the content, and they kept it for a long time. They sent it to Iron Mountain, and probably they kept it, some of that, for indefinitely, right? So that infrastructure was established, it was in place, those people were in place, those teams were set up, and it kind of progressed over the period of time. And today, till date, all that is working as it is. There is no change in that environment. So what we are suggesting is, we have to look at every single company is, if they fail on something, if somebody fat-fingered, drop their database, or something is broken, they have to recover that. That should fall under operational recovery. Now, operational recovery is your DR copy, your N+1 instances, your some cloning which is sitting on-prem or in the cloud, or some sort of a snapshot. That's where you go to recover all the fat finger, all the instant crash or something wrong, right? That's the BCM strategy, that's your DR strategy, that's your N+1 strategy. Now, if you want to store anything for more than 1 day, and now this is provocative, there will be a lot of contradiction over here, but if not 1 day, you want to change it to 1 week. If you want to store from 1 day to 1 week to 1 year to 7 years, that should go through a archive type of a framework, and you should archive that instead of backing up. Once you do that, you took out enormous amount of cost from the infrastructure. You got rid of all your data domains. You got rid of all your tape library. You got rid of all your Iron Mountain expenses and things like that. And now you have a clean archive in place where you can run all your futuristic thing which you want to do, machine learning, artificial intelligence, computer vision, you name it. So that's the enablement. It's not like bringing in other product which can do a backup in a more creative way. Backup should not exist. Point in time images should get out of the way. That's the message over here is, unless we do that, like, we won't be successful in any of these organizations. And that is also a first design principle thinking coming out of Google Cloud and Amazon and some of these cloud providers.
So
Fascinating. Howard, is that
Yeah.
possible? Can
So-
one eliminate backups?
I mean, the answer is yes and no, right? I would say, like, we need to look at what the job of IT is, and it's interesting to talk about backup because when Paul, when you and I do our kind of evolution of IT discussion, it's all about lifecycle management.
Right.
And the lifecycle management started in infrastructure, right? Where we really thought about IT as lifecycle management of hardware, right? What's going on with SQL? Well, we're upgrading the server this quarter. When we upgrade the server, we replace the hardware, we redo the image, we reinstall the SQL server, we restore from backup, blah, 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 right? That's the point that we do the upgrades. That's the point that we really think and focus on the SQL server. With VMware and virtualization, and especially cloud, that has changed to application management. And the challenge there is we really needed to move beyond that about 4 years ago into data management, right? Because the fact is, hardware gets more expensive to keep over time. Applications have a longer lifespan, but get more expensive to keep over time. But data actually becomes more valuable over time. It's the only asset that becomes more valuable over time. We figure out new ways to get value from data that we didn't know had value because of the value we got from data before we looked at that data. Right. And so what Inderjeet's saying kind of focuses on two problems just contained within that statement. The first is backup is the only remnant from infrastructure management, from hardware lifecycle management.
Right.
We continue to do backup the same way we did when we cared about the hardware, as though we still care about the hardware.
Right, because the concern was a crash disk at that point.
Right.
And we're treating everything like a crash disk.
Right. We're concerned with some hardware failure that's going to involve a restore.
Right.
Rather than a design from the application standpoint where the hardware doesn't matter, so I don't care if the hardware fails. I have other things in place to mitigate that risk.
Right.
And it fully ignores the fact that we should be in phase 3, which is data management, because all of the stuff we put in backup is dark.
Right.
It's either completely removed from the system, put in a little turtle, put on a truck and taken to Iron Mountain or some other Iron Mountain-like location where it could not possibly be darker. I don't think they even have the lights turned on. Right? Or it's encapsulated in some other format that puts it inside effectively another kind of shell that we still can't get access to. And you know what I've never heard in my 35 years, I think, that I've been doing, no, 30, I think I did the math. It's like 32 years that I've been doing this. I've never heard a customer say, my backup window is shorter than it was 5 years ago. Right? We have customers where when we talk to them about backup, one of their biggest concerns is we're about to hit 24 hours. Our backup window takes 24 hours. Okay, cool. So let's look at it a different way and go, there are a few things that are fundamentally true. Backup is supposed to be risk mitigation. So let's stop thinking about it as backup and let's look at the risk mitigation component. How do I mitigate the risk of a data loss event to my corporation? That's a design consideration. And then 2, I'm really supposed to be in the data management business more than anything else and really striving to get value from my data. So if I'm already creating a way to mitigate risk by making, let's say, another copy of the data of the application of the system, then I'm also enabling myself to use that secondary copy, that hot spare, as it were, as a read location for my data analytics, therefore moving that traffic off of my primary application and maybe extending the performance lifespan of that primary application system. And I do all of that by eliminating backup.
It's especially interesting now that there's a rebalance of application performance versus availability, right?
100%.
Where I had 9 to 5 users, now I have 6 a.m. to midnight users, and I might have 724 users, and therefore backup window becomes an incredibly relevant issue there, right? Where I now don't have a window, it doesn't exist. Therefore, I have to implement different technology to support the availability required for the users.
I mean, backup is the only unitasker we still have running.
Right.
Everything else,
It's the only thing we
multiple
schedule
pieces
still.
of value. But
Yeah.
backup not only is a unitasker, but while it's running, everything else suffers.
Right.
So we really, 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 as organizations, need to focus on how do I get rid of any unitasker in my environment? Any, period. And let's start with backup. And I don't mean, right, kind of to your point, Inderjeet, I don't mean turn a light switch and just turn off backup. I mean, focus on try to identify where's your low hanging fruit. What are things that are coming up with refresh and how can I do it differently when I refresh those? How can my lifecycle management now include, not only am I no longer going to allow the creation of sacred cows, those things that we don't touch and we pray to and we hope they don't crash and because they're so fragile, but how do I also, anything new that gets rolled out, I use an alternative to traditional backup. I use some combination of snapshotting and long-term archiving and replication and hot spare to ensure that I've done the same percentage of risk mitigation, the same long-term archiving, the same regulatory compliance that I did with backup, only now I'm doing it intelligently.
That's actually a good point. Inderjeet, aside from the technology, the tools we need to worry about, what's the business change that has to be put in place first? Like, do we actually have real regulatory, contractual, legislative limitations? Do we have political complexities within the organization? Do we just have, I've been doing it for 150 years because I have a 150-year-old bank and it is what it is? Like, do those have to be resolved either at the same time or before we even talk about the technology side?
So Paul, like, you listed out quite a few of these, right?
Yeah.
So my answer is all of above. And let me expand on that one is effectively GDPR. It's a common phrase. People in financial industries, like, using twice in the same sentences these days, right? So as a matter of fact, GDPR is not only the regulators coming back and asking for information that are you guys doing it right? Basically, it enables you as a customer of a bank. You can go and demand that. Are you able, hey, Bank XYZ, are you able to produce the information, like, where my information is used, where my social security, where my name, where my address is used? So now customers are getting smart because more and more information is coming out of the cloud providers and everywhere. Now they are getting on the bandwagon and they're going back and asking these GDPR type of questions directly instead of a GDPR regulator coming back to the bank and asking those things. So effectively, bank need to know that, how much I'm storing, what I'm storing, and how I'm going to pull together all that information to produce reports so that I can satisfy these customer, I can satisfy these regulators. So if they have no clear understanding of that, how their data is stored, because the data part of the data happens to be sitting in the backups, which they're not supposed to keep any of that information, but they have no means to pull that information out and know that, this is what I have stored in the backup. They have absolutely no clue about that, because which department you go and ask that question, right? There are multiple departments, compliance and governance team in any of the bank and financial companies. There are 5 people, maybe 10 in the big ones. Those 10 people have no clue, like, what is stored and where is stored and how is stored.
Right.
So that's what.
So what's interesting about GDPR, what's missing from GDPR? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, but there's one big glaring omission that is not accidental from GDPR. There's no grandfather clause. You
Yes.
don't get to say this stuff was in a backup. You don't get to say this stuff was on paper. There's no excuse for it. And that doesn't mean you can't use backup. That doesn't mean you can't back it up. And that doesn't mean that in the event that someone executes their right to be forgotten, you have to do restorations of your last 70 years of backup. What it means is you have to have a methodology that if backup is ever used, you re-execute all of the workflows to ensure that none of the PII that was supposed to be removed has been restored. And that is so complex. And I'm honestly aware of 0 companies doing it. That doesn't mean there aren't any. I'm just not aware of them.
But so Howard, that's the very point, that is coming down the point, like, every bank, every single company have to produce that information now. You cannot basically simply achieve that from a backup. Like, you have to have a very rigor catalog based archive solution. so that we can catalog how the information is coming into the company and how it's being staged into multiple locations, which means every single organization have to formulate a life cycle of IO. Means there is an IO coming in a bank or a retail company or insurance company or whatever it is. How that IO is basically translating from one point to other point, from production to DR to the trading to post trade, and then to compliance and governance, and then going back to the backup or archive, whatever it is. And you can end up seeing that, there are 30, 40 copies of the same content sitting everywhere. There is no reason for that to happen. There is no reason for something like that to continue. All that thing need to be thought about. All that thing need to be rationalized. And why people are not able to do it? Because backup sits in the middle. People think that, okay, I have an operational recovery and I have an archive mechanism into the same board, and I should be able to run it like that. Until this is sorted out, there won't be any agility, there won't be any data reuse, which is the most popular thing these days. And essentially, that's a cost constraint. Means you cannot take the cost out of the environment until you have done something like that.
So what are the steps? Give me what's the 3, 4, 5 steps from today till a backupless society?
So there are few attributes, right? So there are 9 different attributes we must have into a new infrastructure. And those attributes are, it should be able to do analytics, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, and so on and so forth. It should be able to enable for data democratization, means you should be able to open up access to whoever want to repurpose or reuse that data. It should be able to satisfy compliance and governance framework of all different kind, not only GDPR, not only Basel III, CCPA, and 50 other things. You should be able to run your cyber testing on it if you need it. You should be able to use that for disaster recovery, should you want to use it that way. Now, in terms of any regulatory reporting, FINRA reporting, this and that and whatnot, you should be able to pull out all the reports out of it. Now, it will enable data science type of a scenario within your own company, because now everything is properly tagged, everything is properly archived. You can run deep query, you can run deep searches to pull the information you're looking for. Now, most importantly, it should improve agility into your organization, which is the glue, which is the grease where the wheels are working and everything. So these are the attributes. Now, how you go about and doing it, first and foremost is you follow the life cycle of IO, you look at an application. Now, within that application, you have to see that now I have to secure this application so that I can recover it in case of a failure. That is your DR strategy, that is your N+2 strategies and all those things. Now, the application need to retain the data for the archive purposes. So simply, it needs to be passed through a catalog where you are able to tag everything. Means, okay, this particular attribute, this particular column is for compliance. This is for some sort of a monetization. It could be customer information. It could be whatever it is. And the other attribute will be, it could be for IT need, for how long, how big the files are, what are the attributes of the files and all those things. So once we have tagged everything, then it comes back to how we're going to store it, where we're going to store it. Now, object storage is one of the main phenomena happening in the market space. So store it on the object store it on-prem, store it on cloud. Once you have done that, you're going to see that this backup is completely redundant. There is no use of making the point-in-time images. But fact of the matter is, pick one application at a time, go through this very framework we just talked about. And this is not utterly complex, but this is the transformational level thinking leadership has to think through, and they have to challenge their IT infrastructure. They have to challenge their business application team, and they have to say that we have to get the backup out in 365 days. Here is the framework, here is the guardrails, go and make it happen. And trust me, every application team will understand that, okay, I can recover my application and I can archive everything properly. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's secure, it's future-proof. Why the hell I'm doing all that backup crap? They're gonna see through. But until it's said in that format and that definition, rather than slapping a different plaster and saying that, oh, we got a new backup, which can do 50 other things, it's not gonna work.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think the reality is the first step is look to EIM, hands down.
Yep.
Most of the time, what I see is organizations that struggle with these conversations don't have a clue where their data is. They looked at EIM and they went, oh crap, this is complex, and they ran away, screaming most of the time. The fact is, look to EIM. I don't mean complete EIM, right? But certainly start down the path and then start looking at how do I automate my EIM process, my EIM workflows. And one of the steps that you take into consideration is resiliency of the data, resiliency of the application, and resiliency of the business function. And if that's not part of your EIM, that becomes the wrapper around the EIM wheel, right? If EIM is the wheel, then your resiliency and your recoverability is the tire around the wheel. Right?
And some of this might simply be how I measure people. If you measure that team via protection, they're going to protect. But if you measure that team via enablement, then they enable, right? So you got to think about even sort of that double click. Now, let's wrap up, but I have one interesting question, financial services, that I think both of you need to have an opinion on. So this morning, this very morning, we see news for Manhattan, JP Morgan Chase, suggesting that some of their leaders, especially the floor leaders, come into the office and work from downtown. What do you think about that for them, and what do you think about that for you?
Right. So Howard, I'll take the first stab on that one. So Paul, I'm a believer of that. If you want to be a truly innovative company, and especially on the trading floor where very important decisions are made because a variety of information flowing through, less distraction of the outside world, you are just hyper focused on what you do on the trading floor, which is trade, and make decisions about big trade, and there are a lot of attributes around those things. So I would say that up to some extent, I like that idea for some important core part of the business, which need to be insulated from all sort of a distraction, but not everything else. So especially on the trading floor, if they want to keep something like that, which can, and they think that they will have a better collaboration, they will have a better information flow, because they are making very big decisions, which is moving the markets. So, I like that idea, but, I would counter that with one more plug over here is, I also had a very interesting conversation with one of the fintech, one of the startup company, and their CEO came back and he said that he have problem with creativity by doing things virtually. So, and he took literally 45 to 1 hour just to talk about that, why it's so important, why you have to be in front of a whiteboard, which you cannot wiggle on the screen, why you have to look people in the eye and, just give them all the body language, all the modalities you have so that they can interact with you. And, there are people firmly believing that creativity is achieved, like, when you are in the same room, when you are interacting with each other. But again, am I 100% bought into that? Maybe 25%. Yes, you can be creative remotely because we have means and tools and technology available. But for certain decisions where you have to insulate yourself from any sort of a distraction, I would suggest that, yes, we can bring those into a room.
So you honestly, you should send our Leading in a Pandemic series to that fintech leader, because we've talked about that exact thing, and I think we actually have an entire podcast on kind of human interactivity in the difference between virtual and reality.
Virtual reality.
Between virtual and reality. Anyhow, to your question, I think there's two reasons why in-person makes a huge difference in that very specific circumstance, and it has to do with trading. The first is they've invested millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into exceptionally low latency networks that really do make a difference in the trades and trading volume that's occurring. So I think that's one reason, right? That's not available in your home. That's only available in the office. But the second is the more important, and that is Ensuring ethics in communication is a critical piece of modern trading regulation. And I can do that in the office because I can secure communications in the office, right? I can have you check your cell phone in. I can ensure that cell phone calls aren't leaving. I could even install a cell phone blocker if necessary, right? You've got your phone, you've got all of the things that the company controls that are used for communication during business hours. Of course, I can't control what you do when you get in the car, but I most certainly can control what you do while you're enabled to trade in the office. And those two things are really only most efficient and most effective within the confines of the office. So I can kind of see from those two perspectives the point and purpose. Now, I do think outside of extremely specific in-office requirements, that for the most part, we really should be pushing more for work from home, right? To your point, Inderjeet, right? Creativity, I would argue, is 100% better in person when that creativity requires more than one person, right? Two people creating together are going to do it much better in the room, right? It's amazing how different the human mind is, and that multiplies when you get to 3 or 4 or 5 people. Like, these podcasts would be much better if the 3 of us were in the same room. We actually could have a conversation that involves kind of talking over each other. It's the way a normal conversation goes, and it wouldn't be as obnoxious because the human brain is so used to hearing that in the room. But technology doesn't handle it the way the human brain does, right? But you don't need that every day. You don't need that all days.
100% agree with you, Howard. And, I want to respond to one more statement on Paul's questions about, especially with the JPMC making that statement is, that's on the, core key financial side. They are one of the biggest REITs providers, issuer. Right. And if a JPMC makes a statement that we're going 100% remote, what's going to happen to all those Manhattan buildings? What's going to happen to all the real estate REIT market globally? I will leave that for your own imagination. But
we've done that math in a prior sweet spot. Yep. Effectively, a 10% reduction in office space in the US is a $6 billion loss.
Right. And now you peel the onion. Who is the biggest issuer of REITs? JPMC. So it's interesting.
So as I prefer, I get the final word. I appreciate both of you here. Excellent conversation. I think my opinion on this is that I like the option, right? I agree with you that there is a balance between creativity and collaboration, and some you can do virtually, some in many ways you need to do physically. But I do like having the option of going to an office to have those kind of meetings, especially the ancillary effect. Right, the ancillary effect is that all those businesses that are in downtown Manhattan can start to open up again, right? The coffee shops and the dry cleaners and the bakery shop, like all those little guys who also need to open up, also need to get that revenue. Well, it's the business people providing that revenue, right? And I think there's some value there as long as health, safety standards are all in place. Well, thanks to both of you. This has been another episode of The Sweet Spot. I hope you enjoyed it. We got to double click on understanding Inderjeet Rana and his thoughts on his role and smart backup, which is great. And we look forward to his article that he gets disclosed. We absolutely want you to like and subscribe and comment. Every comment we get, we read and understand, discuss, and largely dismiss, but we appreciate the comments regardless. And we look forward to doing another one of these next week, and download and enjoy. For me, thank you very much. And Howard, any final word?
No, we actually do read all the comments and consider them.
Right. That's what I meant to say.
I should say we read both of the comments.
We read both of the comments, and we enjoy them every time, thanks to Daryl who sends them in. Goodbye, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thanks much.